Ann Arbor's been home, and it wasn't until I was probably in my early 30s that I moved away from the city. They were the head of a civil rights organization, the NAACP, the Ann Arbor branch, and they were very active in creating changes in the housing and education patterns in the city of Ann Arbor, integrating jobs, housing, and definitely integrating schools. Well, it certainly let us know that with hard work, all things are possible. And with working together with all kinds of folks. There were people from all races, all ages, interested in the better integration and diversity in the Ann Arbor community. They certainly found those folks and brought them together to make change. Sisters will tell you that I was the last person they would have expected to run for office. Let alone continue a life of public service. I was an apolitical soul until my kids were in school, and it became apparent that we needed a different voice on the school board in my community. I decided to run and see if I couldn't make a difference on the school board. I was surprised by the amount of help that came my way because I was one of very few African Americans in the South Lyons Community School District. But with the help of a lot of folks, I was elected to office and served in that capacity for a little over 8 years. My dad was concerned when I told him I was running for the school board in South Lyon. He just looked at me and said, "You realize you are one black woman in a community that is all white." I realized as a member of the school board that I really didn't have the opportunity to make the kinds of educational change that I thought was important, not just for our district, but for the state. When I started working with Lana after, maybe about a year, I looked at her and said, "Well, when you're done with it, I'm taking your job." I had a very good opponent for that seat the first time around, and he was a solid candidate who echoed so many of my policies. I wondered why he was running as a Republican. Term on the commission was very short because at that time my boss, Lana Pollock, decided she was going to run for the U.S. Senate, and it was not what we call a safe run. She had to give up her seat in order to run, so I threw my hat in the ring. I was fortunate. I was not the first woman running for the Senate in Washtenaw County. Lana Pollock had sort of plowed that ground, and people were accustomed to having a woman in that seat. So I didn't have the challenges of can a woman do the job, but I did have my dad who was very concerned because of race. He said, Ann Arbor talks about its liberal background and how fond of diversity the city is, and he said this is really a very racial community. So he said this will be a tough race for you, and I'm concerned. And because Lana had been in the Senate, her colleagues that were still in the Senate had expectations that the person who succeeded her was going to be as smart, as quick, and so I knew I had to not only work very hard to keep up that standard, but I had to prove to them that an African American woman could be as quick and smart and knowledgeable. We always said to the women when they were elected that you will have to work twice as hard to be as respected on the issues that you specialize in. You could be in a meeting with the departments and you could sit there in the debate and in the discussion. You could make suggestions about how an issue might get resolved or be better approached. And people would just go on talking as if you hadn't said a word. And then you had a guy sitting next to you who would pick up your point and put it on the table, and suddenly it was the most brilliant thing they had ever heard. So you really had to make yourself heard with great ideas. I was in the minority my entire 8 years in the Senate, but I certainly learned at that time to work across the aisle, to find areas of common focus. That was a great education. It certainly helped me to work better with young folks, including my own. And it was an experience that you could take beyond the Michigan legislature. I don't like retirement. I'm sure if I had focused on hobbies and gardening and things like that, I would probably find a way to be happy with that, but I'm a political animal. Running for office is critically important, and I encourage that of all young people, but particularly women. Our voice is still greatly underrepresented in almost all venues. When you look at state government, women's voices are still in a very desperate minority. They aren't going to ask women to run for office. You just have to decide this is something you want to do. You got to have a tough skin and a real desire to put up with that to make change happen.